It's the Dearly Departed podcast, featuring your hosts, historian Scott Michaels and filmmaker Mike Dorsey.
Okay, it's another episode of Dearly Departed podcast, and we're going to do Jaws, because it's a great freaking movie, and why not?
Yeah, and summer's over.
Right.
So why not?
And were the beaches open for July 4th this summer? I don't know. I guess it depends on what state you lived in.
You know, I think they were. I think that it was after, it was, you know, post the real freak out time where they weren't even letting people sit on the beach. So, yeah, I think they were open, but now it's sort of normal now, back to whatever normal is.
Right.
And I ain't going in the frickin' boat. No way am I going in the beach. No way. I don't like the beach. I don't like sand. I do not like animals in the water. I don't like any of it.
There's no part of the beach that appeals to you. I like sitting on the beach, but I'm with you about the no water thing.
No, I want to see. I don't like wind. I don't like sand. I like the water. I like the pretty sun and the moon or whatever. But I don't like any of it. I like lakes. Lakes are sane. You know, I still wouldn't go in it, but I like lakes. Yeah, not the big ones. Like, you know, I'm from Detroit, so we had all the lakes around us. But I like the little pond lakes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's probably because of this movie. I mean, when this movie came out, it was a big deal. I mean, I was there for all of that. My grandmother, who was in her 60s, took me to see this movie like 4 or 5 times. You know, the standing in line, sold out stuff. It was it was a big deal for me. All my art projects in school were all Jaws themed. I made a mobile with the sharks and stuff. I mean, I was a nut about this movie. I was.
And Peter Benchley, who wrote the book that it was based on, he later on in life regretted that he turned people against sharks so much with his book and became a big sea life conservationist for the rest of his life. Even not that he was ashamed of Jaws, but what's that?
No, yeah, I'm sure he really regretted becoming a household word and writing bestsellers. Yeah, that must have been a real. But he said he couldn't. He said he couldn't write Jaws today, knowing what he knew, because it was just a work of fiction. So it is fun, and the movie is the same. I mean, the movie's a bit. Nowadays, you really have to suspend reality. I can still get back into the mode of 1975, but I saw something on YouTube not that long ago with these showing millennials Jaws for the first time, and so it has these 3 or 4 kids, or kids in their 30s, I guess, watching this movie, and just like, some of it was scary, but the shark was hella fake, and
that's funny, because I watched it again a couple days ago. I got the 4K disc, and I thought it held up really, really well, but I'm not a young kid now looking at it for the first time, so I guess maybe it's a generational thing, but I think it holds up pretty dang well.
I do too.
I guess the shark would look pretty fake compared to CGI stuff.
There were times, I mean, there were times where I thought, no, this does not look real. In the movie, there were times, even back then, I could tell it wasn't legitimately a shark. There was also really obvious ones, like when Hooper went in the water in the cage. It wasn't even him. It was just a diver. It wasn't even his face. And when they pulled the cage up, there was like a shark that was only like about 6 feet big. They had to make a miniature of the cage to make it look like, when it was trapped between the boat and the cage.
Well,
so some of it was really...
This was a piece of trivia that I wanted to tell you about, because I knew it would you would find it especially interesting. They got a little person and put a little person in a little cage in Australia. I'm not making this up. It's in the making of document 2. They found a little person, and because they could film real sharks down in Australia, but they wanted to make the shark look obviously bigger, because it's supposed to be a 4,500 pound shark or whatever. And so they made a smaller shark cage and put a little person in it. And this guy who'd never done this before in his life and had real sharks, come up, and that's how they got some of that great footage. And then other times they put a little dummy in it. But yeah. Movie magic.
I love it. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that was analog. That was all. There was no CGI. There were some tricks. The day to night shooting that they did, which was pretty obvious at some point. But the two guys on the on the dock with the big roast that they threw out into the water. I mean, that was like, clearly shot during the daytime, and I could tell that back when they did it, and when I saw it for the first time, it just looked like it was manipulated in that way.
The documentary, one of the producers made a really great point, though, about if they made it today and used CGI. They said there were some great elements in the film that wouldn't have been in there. Like, for example, all the stuff with the barrels. Shooting the barrels in it and to try and keep, all those scenes. That made it so because Bruce the shark, which is what Spielberg named it after his lawyer, this mechanical shark that they had so many problems with. When the barrels were getting dragged around, they didn't have to deal with the shark robot anymore, and the barrels, harpooning the barrels to the shark, was a way for movie magic, a way for them to get around having to use the shark, because it was a lot easier to drag barrels around, and the barrels are actually a really cool part of the movie. And he's like, if we'd had CGI, we wouldn't have thought to do that, and that wouldn't have been in the film. So I thought that was interesting.
I guess the problems are legendary about the shark and the mechanical shark, and I guess they just kind of winged it. So much of the dialogue was being written the day of, but I guess they just decided shark's not working. I guess that was what everyone was so used to hearing. So they just started filming without it and making it seem like the shark was there, and it was really quite effective. I was watching, like, when in the estuary, when the scouts are swimming, they're getting their merit badge. You don't see the shark for most of it. You see him attack the scout leader, but otherwise you see that almost like a drone shot going by that little boy. And
it's a great shot. I love that shot. Yeah, that POV shot. Yeah.
It was really, they did a lot. I mean, the shark was a character without being on the screen, which was, and also the John Williams music helped a great deal too.
Absolutely. I think Spielberg said that he credited 50% of the film's success to John Williams' score.
Like you said, when you introduced it, those two notes, everyone knows what they are,
And he said, Spielberg said the first time that Williams played that for him, he thought he was pulling his leg. Because it was so simple. I can believe that. And John Williams started to go into the psychology of it. How this will, tell people the shark is there even when the shark isn't there yet. It's almost like another way to cheat around not having the shark on screen all the time, right? Because the music does it for them. They
always showed, like, the attacks from below, or if they weren't attacks from below, and the swimmers were always like 100 feet up. Their feet were nowhere near the bottom. These little kids in their rafts and everyone just playing around, and then from below they're always like, the surface is like seriously like 30 feet up. So there was a lot of that kind of thing to accentuate the water depth, I guess.
Right. They did a lot of test screenings of the film. Studios do that. They screen for various audiences outside of LA. They do a Long Beach, or they'll do in the Midwest or somewhere, non-Hollywood type audiences, right? And just to see how it tests and see how audiences react. And Spielberg really got into the psychology of how to scare people. And he said the biggest scare always was when Brody is chumming the water and his back is turned to the water, and all of a sudden the shark comes out. That was always the biggest scare in the movie. And then there was another scene, when Hooper is diving underwater and he sees the head through the hole in the boat.
Ben Gardner, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that scene, when they filmed it originally, Spielberg felt like they'd screwed up the timing and it wasn't as scary as he wanted it to be. And the studio wouldn't pay for him to reshoot, so Spielberg spent $3,000 of his own money, which is about $16,000 today, to go and build a little mock-up out of balsa wood and redo that scare. And he got it to be way scarier. But then he noticed in the next test screening that the audience screamed really loud at that, but then he got maybe 50% of the scream out of the chumming water scene. And he realized that what he was doing was when that head jumps out at you instead of just kind of rolls into view, it puts the audience on alert that that's how they're going to scare you in this movie. They're going to do kind of jump scares. And now he says from there, the rest of the movie, people are almost on alert looking for that to happen again. So when the shark kind of comes out of the water in the chumming scene, it's not as scary. So he went back to the original version of that other shot so that it wasn't as scary, so that the rest of the movie would be more scary. It's kind of crazy. He was only 26 when he did this.
Yeah. It's astounding that that he got that gig. It really is. And then because there was I guess a couple of times when they were gonna, sort of say, "No, this guy's not going to be the one." But But no, it's amazing that he did that, because I think before this, well, he did Duel, which is also like Jaws in a way, man versus machine, and then the Night Gallery episode with Joan Crawford, which was iconic. I think it was the very first episode, or part of a trilogy in the first episode in Night Gallery. So he was still pretty.
And he'd done Sugarland Express at that point.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And it was so challenging that there were days when they came home with no footage. Imagine filming all day with a crew and not getting a single shot that's usable.
It's interesting what comes out of something like that. The fact that it was the highest grossing film for 2 years
until Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
I believe it was the first film to break $100 million at the box office as well.
Yeah, it was. I remember seeing popcorn going in the air. I remember screams out loud. And also when they showed Chrissy's her hand and stuff like that, and they pulled it out. I mean, there were audible reactions. Now it's sort of like,
Right.
But back, people were really tripping in that to see that movie. It was a big deal, man. That was a terrifying movie.
People would scream so much that that you would miss the next dialogue. Because people would still be reacting for the next minute to what had just happened.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever, maybe The Exorcist, but I don't think I've ever been in a Halloween. When Halloween came out, that was another one where people were screaming out loud. Yeah, yeah, it never happened again. Stuff like that would never happen again. Because people are so desensitized, and jump scares are part of everything anymore. It's they were more artfully done back then. It was clever. It wasn't put in just to scare the shit out of you, It had something to do with the plot, and it was put there to do that, but it wasn't, I don't know, it didn't feel like it was, I don't know, what's the term, just sort of pandering to the horror movie crowd, I guess.
It wasn't a cheap jump scare, right?
Yeah.
All right, so do we want to, let's talk about some other stuff before we get into Jaws.
Okay.
We talked about the 1989 Oscars in the last episode, and I looked it up. That Oscars had a song and dance number called Oscar Winners of Tomorrow with a bunch of young actors. And it was funny because it's mainly people you never heard of. And then and it was introduced by Bob Hope and Lucille Ball. And it's a bunch of no-names. And then all of a sudden in the middle of the song, Patrick Dempsey pops up.
Yeah.
And then Christian Slater comes in. It was kind of funny.
The young Hollywood.
They got a couple of big stars there that they got right, but the other ones not so much.
Ricky Lake was in there too.
Oh, really?
And that was Lucy's last appearance, and Lucy was looking good. And she had her Lucy's legs were featured in that. Yeah, that was it was a God. Yeah, I don't have to tell you how much I love that. We talked about that.
We also we talked about the Ritchie Valens and the Pacoima mid-air collision. I think we've probably talked about that on 2 shows now. There was one more thing I came across. There was only one surviving live recording of Ritchie Valens playing a live concert, and it was played at Pacoima Junior High School.
Interesting.
7 weeks before he died. He went back. He was already famous at this point. It was kind of a coming home type of a deal, playing a show for his old school, and it's really sweet. You should look it up. They released it on an album because, all these Ritchie Valens fan clubs popped up, and then he died, and they didn't have anything to release, so they were kind of, just like when any other artist dies in their prime, they're looking for unreleased material, and they realized they had this live album that they could put out, so they released it, and it's called Ritchie Valens in Concert at Pacoima Junior High, released in 1960.
So it's an entire performance. It's not just a single.
It's great, and this girl that was the president of his fan club introduces him at the beginning, and it's really sweet and frank. It's very good. The audio recording is decent for the time, and he sounds great live. We got some really cool feedback from, first of all, from Melissa on Patreon. We talked about Chappaquiddick, and she said it's based on a book of the same name by Leo D'Amour. And D'Amour got a big advance from Random House to write it, and when he turned in the manuscript, Random House rejected it and sued to get the advance back. Rumor has it that Jackie O put pressure on them to reject it.
Yeah, I would believe that, most definitely, yeah.
That's crazy, because Jackie O went into the publishing business after.
Yeah, I forget. I think she edited Michael Jackson's biography. That's how they became friends. But I just watched a couple of weeks ago that movie, the more recent Chappaquiddick movie, and it was really interesting. It was well done, I think, but it also really, really portrayed well what theoretically happened to Mary Jo Kopechne. There's not a lot of ways that you can interpret what happened to her, and it was horrifying. It was fascinating. It is a fascinating story, horrifying, and the whole Kennedy chemistry between Teddy and Joe Kennedy, the father, was really, really, really interesting. I liked it. It's a good movie. I mean, it's a terrible subject, but a good movie.
Sure. All right. Oh, I saw this on your page, Scott. Robin Williams' Death House is for sale in Tiburon.
Yeah.
It was originally listed last year for $7.25 million and has now been listed for $5.9. So it is a steal. It's a beautiful house right on the ocean. It's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want to live there.
You wouldn't?
No, it's the ocean. I hate the ocean.
Oh, that's right. I was going to say you'd
right.
potentially have like the funniest ghost ever, though. Just imagine.
That's your definition of funny, Robin Williams?
I grew up on Robin Williams comedy, so yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I'm a huge Robin Williams fan. I grew up. I was just the right age, I think, to really like Robin Williams growing up. So yeah, not so much later in his career, but the 80s and kind of early 90s, yeah, I was a big Robin Williams
Somebody
fan.
was watching the Birdcage the other day, and I was like, oh my God, I can't bear it. I cannot bear that movie. It's just everything. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that movie in the least, and he makes me very uncomfortable, and Hank Azaria makes me uncomfortable. I understand stereotypes are funny. I get it. I really do.
Sure.
But God, that was painful to sit through. And not even for the stereotype. I just don't like the actors, but that's just me. The one bit that is great in the Birdcage, Gene Hackman at the end when they're sneaking him out, that kills me. I mean, I was laughing out loud at that. That was great.
I love when he doesn't want to be the only girl that doesn't have someone to dance with.
Yeah, so I got to give props where props are due. That was pretty funny. But
and that they got Hackman to do that because he's a very opinionated actor and has a very macho reputation. So getting him to do drag at the end of the movie must have been not the easiest thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, interesting. That's a conversation I would like to have been listened to.
Right.
So I got an email from somebody, and I forgot this completely. A guy by the name of Mark Henderson, who is a listener, and he reminded me that because we talked about in our Grease podcast that there's the theory that Grease is actually a ghost story. And that Sandy drowned at the beginning of the movie. When they say saved her life, she nearly drowned. Well, she actually did drown, and the whole movie is like a ghost story. And it ends with them, flying off into the sky. And it's just a really, I don't know how much depth there is to that, but I did remember reading that a couple of times, thinking, wow, that's a pretty. There were a couple of lines in the movie. I just remember in Summer Nights is supposed to explain it, how she actually did die. And I don't know. It's a great story, and that's cool of Mark to bring it up. It's a wild theory. There's a couple of wild theories about Jaws too, which we're going to get into, I think, too. Yeah, there's a couple of good little nuggets that have to do with Jaws.
Do you have any hate mail or anything?
I do, actually. I have a good one.
Hate mail.
So I did, I did my YouTube channel, Dearly Departed Online, and I do, videos, sort of I've been doing like biographical videos. I did one on Jay Sebring, did one on Gilda Radner and the Lennon sisters, and this one I did on Stephen Parent, the kid who was killed on Cielo Drive as part of the quote unquote Manson murders. Anyway, so in the movie, in the video that I put up, I mentioned that I think it's a potentially that Stephen Parent was gay and that he had an affair that night with William Garrettson, the caretaker, who I mean, it's a long, involved story, but actually, out of the 30 minutes I made this video, it was only about 1 minute of it. But
Right.
I thought that it made more sense for this kid at 11:30 p.m. to go out for what he thought might be a little bit of a kind of a booty call with William Garrett, and it ended up not happening. He didn't stay for very long, and they did tests on Stephen Parent's body to rule that out. But it was obviously relevant enough for them to do those tests.
Sure.
And to quiz William Garrettson about this. So anyway, I got some flack about that because people think that's a terrible thing to talk about, and I was like, all right, whatever, feel the way you want to feel. But this is a good one. So this guy writes, considering the time era of this boy's death, I think it was fucked up of you to even bring up the specter of the kid being gay while his family might still be around and able to hear it, like they haven't been through enough. You fags. You fags always seem to get off on your gay labeling of any attractive male. I never said he was attractive.
Ooh, that's interesting.
I'm not saying he wasn't either. But, that was
that's
very
interesting
telling.
that came up, though. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. You fags always seem to get off on your gay labeling of any attractive male. This would also explain your intense detail, including buy an exact replica radio to his whereabouts. I don't even know what that means. What's the matter? Doesn't your Justin Bieber fake porn cutting it for you?
This guy's references are all over. That was it? That was his sign
I know,
off?
right? So he thinks Stephen Parent's an attractive guy. He brings up Justin Bieber, which is
out of
interesting.
Nowhere.
Yeah, so I don't know. So that was my hate mail. Lots of comments, lots of hateful comments, but I usually just delete those because they're irrelevant. They're relevant, like as in I'm ugly and I'm a horrible person. But this one was actually constructive.
I got Twitter famous this past week. I had a tweet that I made. It was just a throwaway joke. It was apolitical, which I think helped why it blew up. But it was just a joke about the Postal Service and mail-in voting and stuff. All I tweeted was, can we just put whoever sends out the Bed Bath & Beyond coupons in charge of vote by mail? Because they find everybody.
Yeah.
I tweeted it, and some people kind of reacted, whatever, and I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and I had all these texts from friends saying, check your Twitter, and it had received 141,000 likes. And tens
awesome.
of thousands of retweets, and it ended up peaking it got 27,000 retweets and 201,000 likes.
No shit.
And I was just like, I have said way funnier stuff than that got 2 likes. It is so random the way this happens. But there was really nothing to take issue with that because everybody could laugh about that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
I've done other tweets where people are like, I hope you get raped and murdered. Fuck you forever kind of stuff. So I didn't really get that out of this one. But it was fun.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Anybody good retweet it?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Several celebrities did, and the one I'm most proud of is Monica Lewinsky retweeted it. Her official account.
That's awesome. She has an official, Monica official.
It's verified Twitter account, Monica Lewinsky. Yeah, I really like her online presence because, of course, she's a big, advocate for anti-bullying and stuff because she's kind of like the original online, bully.
Slut shaming, yeah.
With Drudge and all that stuff that really ruined her life for a time. So I really like her presence online is really cool and interesting. So I was proud.
She
of that
she did a TED Talk, which is pretty. She doesn't name names. She doesn't talk trash about anybody. She just explains the situation and what happened to her, and it's riveting. It's really fascinating, and your heart goes out to her. She was young and enamored, and I get that, and
right.
So I would highly recommend her TED Talk. It's very interesting.
Cool.
Who else retweeted it? I want to know.
Gosh, I can't. It's hard for me to find out who all did it. I can't. I don't know how to go in. I tried using TweetDeck to figure it out, but it's limited results. And I know some bigger accounts did, and I can't remember off the top of my head now who all did it. But some people with big followers, because you don't really get to 200,000 likes unless accounts that have way more followers than I have, promote it basically and retweet it still to all their people.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
that's cool. I'm trying to think if I had anything good like that. I know that Julie Klausner, who I love, follows me on Twitter. She's from that show on Hulu called, oh my God, what's it? Difficult People, which is this is the most caustic show I love. And I got Roseanne. Roseanne liked one of my tweets once, which was kind of funny.
No kidding.
yeah. It was something about Leonard Nimoy when he died, and I don't know what I wrote about it, but something. It wasn't evil, but she did like it. I don't know if she retweeted it, but that was kind of funny.
That's awesome.
Twitter's fine. Isn't it weird how obsessed you get with who liked it? Social media is such a weird thing.
It is. It's like it's all about validation, right?
Yeah.
Finding that validation.
And unfortunately, it's so easy just to go send. Okay, what do they say? And you spend an hour, doing that. It's so stupid,
For
and it's just, yeah, it's dumb. But that's the way things are.
But it's fun. I had one other tweet like last year, I think, that got like 50,000 likes or something like that. And in both instances, this one and that one, what for me was the most fun is when friends reach out to me and say, hey, some other friend of theirs that I've never met sent me your tweet because they thought it was cool. And I was like, hey, wait, I know that guy.
That's cool.
But a comedian made a funny observation about that whenever a tweet blows up like that. He says it's like a comedian walking out on stage saying a joke that totally kills, everybody laughs like crazy, and then the audience gets up and walks away. And that's it. Because it's like, because I had like 1,700 followers before that, and I've added about maybe 900, so I got up to like 2,600. So it is kind of, but you would think if that many people like something that you might get more of a following, but it really is just the nature of social media. Oh, I like, and then move on,
Yeah, I like the subscribers on my YouTube channel. I've got, X amount of subscribers, but like 1/8 of those people, if even that many, will watch the video.
Right.
Because it's just funny that, people find it in other ways. But it's interesting. Mark Masick, my friend Mark, who wrote Hollywood Remains to be Seen, he equated Facebook and Twitter with standing on a street corner just yelling something out. Right. It's really basically what it is.
In a tornado.
And sometimes you're at the center of it, right?
Exactly.
But you're talking about tweets. I mean, one of the people we're going to be talking about today, our most recent death, is the most liked tweet in the history of Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting
I can't
segue
wait.
there.
Well, I mean, let's get into it then. Deaths of the week, or in this case, deaths of the last 5 weeks.
News of the week.
So number one, which you just alluded to, of course, has to be Chadwick Boseman. Black Panther, his most famous role, but also he played, look at this guy's short career, what he did. He played Jackie Robinson in 42, he played James Brown in Get On Up, and he played Thurgood Marshall in Marshall. That's amazing.
Yeah. That was a shock. That was a real shocker, too, because he was diagnosed at the time he was making Black Panther.
And apparently he kept it a secret from everybody, except obviously his family. I think the director of Black Panther didn't even know about it.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, there's doing a little bit of looking around online, and there are a couple of times where he looked pretty thin, not well. And people did remark about that. People are concerned, but it was never out that he was actually physically ill like that.
Yeah, and that kind of led to an interesting call for people to be nicer because I guess a few months ago he posted something and he looked really gaunt and skinny, and people made fun of him for how he looked. I think some people were calling him Crack Panther, because it was looks, and he ended up taking the photos down as a result of that. And now those people probably feel like real assholes. Because now we know that he was fighting, a terminal cancer, colon cancer, the whole time, and didn't. So it's like, be nice. You don't know what people are going through,
No, people just go from 0 to vile in like 0.0002 seconds. You know what I mean? It just, when you think you're saying something, like I posted his obituary in a group that I belong to, and it got within a minute. Start the shitty comments. It's like, you know what? You people are just vile, hateful people. I just don't understand the need to step in and, first of all, voice any kind of negativity about anything online, unless someone asks your opinion. But it just seems like how shitty people are. It never doesn't shock me.
Right. I always tell myself, like when that person, said I should be raped and murdered, I know that it doesn't really bother me because I know that is about that person. That's about what they're going through in their life, and they're lashing out because of whatever they're dealing with themselves, right? So when you come across people that are really negative in the comments and stuff, I always know that person is just kind of venting their own issues.
Don't really
directing
care.
it at you. You're their escape. You're their release valve, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they can take their feelings and shove them up their asses.
But
I have no time for that. But I mean, delete, block. I have no problem with that. In fact, my life is a lot nicer lately because of all of that. I try to spend a lot less time on it, and I just delete, block, unfollow.
I love blocking people.
And it's just liberating to not have to deal with it. Anything that provokes a reaction. Gone.
Right. You don't need them. I see people, like even today I had a friend on Facebook posted, look what this person's saying to me, and I'm like, why don't you just unfriend them? Yeah.
It's really easy.
It's really easy.
Yeah, but it's all that victim culture. Yeah, there's a lot of that. People, it's like a badge of honor to be, that kind of, be the focal point of that kind of nastiness, I guess. Some people get off on it, but anyway.
So Chadwick was also in the recent Da 5 Bloods by Spike Lee, and there will be a posthumously released film on Netflix called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, about blues singer Ma Rainey, which I haven't seen anything on it, but I bet it's great. And there was a really good story that kind of resurfaced. When Bozeman was a student at Howard University, he was part of a group of students, who had gotten into the British American Drama Academy's Midsummer program, but they couldn't go because of the cost. They couldn't afford to go. And actress Felicia Rashad heard about it, called her friend Denzel Washington, and Denzel paid the tuition for the group. And when Denzel was honored last year at AFI for Lifetime Achievement Award, Bozeman got up and told that story, and basically was like, there wouldn't have been a Black Panther without Denzel Washington. For multiple reasons, but for that reason especially. Wow. That he had paid for him to go to school. So yeah, I thought that was really
cool.
Yep.
That's really, really cool.
So Bozeman passed away on August 28th. He was 43, and it was colon cancer.
And he was also, we talked about Franklin Village in the Patreon podcast that we released this week. But he died like about another maybe, I don't know, about 15, 20 houses up from Elvira's old house in that
up
neighborhood.
In the Bird Streets,
above
the Oaks.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Oaks, yeah.
The Oaks, yeah. So actually, yeah. So it just, I didn't realize that he was that close by.
Wow. Next, Olivia de Havilland. One of the last, if not the last, major star from Hollywood's golden age, going back to the 30s. She was 104. She starred with Errol Flynn in Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. She played Melanie Hamilton in Gone with the Wind, of course. And then her and her sister Joan Fontaine are the only siblings to ever win lead actor Oscars. And their sibling rivalry was super famous and went from when they were kids up until when Joan Fontaine died back a few years ago. So kind of crazy. She dated Howard Hughes, Jimmy Stewart, John Huston, and I thought this was super rad. Even though she lost this lawsuit, she sued FX and Ryan Murphy when she was 101 years old for using her likeness without permission in 2017's feud Betty and Joan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I shouldn't really understand the modern laws about interpretations and things like that. But
in public figures and all that, yeah.
Yeah, it was also based on a book, so it was, I don't know, it's just funny. But for that reason, it couldn't be released on DVD or anything until she died.
Oh, interesting! I didn't know that. Yeah, I don't know that I don't really agree with the lawsuit, but I just thought it was cool that at 101 she was still fighting. Like she still had the fight in her. I thought that was rad.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, she was very, very dignified, old school, and yeah, good for her. Good for her.
So she died on July 26, 104, from, of course, natural causes. Wilford Brimley. One of my favorite actors from the 80s, especially. The China Syndrome, The Thing, Tender Mercies, The Natural, Cocoon, The Firm. Of course, he was also the spokesperson for Quaker Oats, famously, because he had diabetes, so he was also very involved with diabetes awareness. And I think it's the American Diabetes Association he was kind of a spokesperson for. What's kind of interesting, people like to joke that he always looked 65, like his whole life. When he did Cocoon, he was only 50. And he's supposed to be in this old folks home, retirement community. All the other actors were like 20 plus years older than him, and they had to bleach his hair out whiter and do kind of spots on his face and stuff to make him look older. But I don't think they had to do that much work. He just had that look.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, he just he did those commercials for it was the Liberty Medical, and the way he pronounced diabetes was diabetes. And that became a meme for a long time, the diabetes. And I have that Death a Day app that I put out, and every day you hear about how somebody famous dies, and I put diabetes a couple of times. People have really been out of shape about it. It's like, you shouldn't mispronounce it that way. It's like, it's in the dictionary now. I don't know if it's because of Wilford Brimley, but 2 pronunciations show up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. One of them is diabetes.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, I don't know if Wilford's responsible for that, but it is there.
Maybe he may have changed English, the English language.
The diabetes.
I loved Cocoon as a kid, and The Natural is in my top 5 favorite movies of all time, and he's fantastic in it. He's so good. So big fan. He passed away on August 1st at the age of 85, and the only thing they said was that he had a kidney condition.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Next up, Regis Philbin. He passed away back on July 24th. Of course, most famous for Live with Regis and Kathy Lee and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And he died at the age of 88 of a heart attack.
Yeah, a very popular man.
Peter Green, a founding member of Fleetwood Mac, even though he was only in it for a few years and left before they got really huge. But he also wrote Black Magic Woman, which became a big hit for Santana. He passed away on July 25th. He was 73, and there was no cause of death listed, just that he died in his sleep. And then we're bringing back a name from the SNL episode, Kathy Smith, a.k.a. Silverbag, who was most famous, unfortunately for her, for shooting up John Belushi with the speedball that killed him at the Chateau Marmont.
Bye. Bye, bitch.
And she had the nickname Silverbag because she supposedly kept her drugs in this silver kind of bag-like purse that she would walk around. Before that, though, she was most famous for being Gordon Lightfoot's girlfriend, and he wrote Sundown about their relationship, his big hit Sundown. And she was also a backup singer. She sang for Levon Helm, and she sang for a couple of members of the band, I think, before they formed the band. And she also claims that she was the inspiration for the band's big hit, The Weight.
Okay. She is a legend in her own mind. Good for her.
She passed away on August 18th. She was 73, suffered health issues for a few years and was on oxygen. And following her death, Gordon Lightfoot said in an interview, "Kathy was a great lady. Men were drawn to her, and she used to make me jealous, but I don't have a bad thing to say about her."
It's a gentleman. Good for her.
Classy,
Good for
classy,
him.
I thought.
Yeah.
Linda Hamilton's twin sister, Leslie, died. Really, her only, I think, show business she ever did was she was a double for Linda in Terminator 2. Otherwise, she worked as a hospice nurse back in New Jersey. Yeah,
I didn't know Linda Hamilton had a twin sister.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It would be weird to have a twin who goes on to be super famous, basically with your face. And
yeah.
That would be really how your paths diverged somehow.
Yeah, that would be an interesting career you could have if that person was anybody, that became famous.
And how often you would get mistaken for them, like all the time.
Yeah, you could totally have a great popping out of birthday cakes kind of stuff, You could do something really legitimately cool with that.
I knew when Almost Famous came out, I knew a girl in L.A. who looked a lot like Kate Hudson. She even had her hair kind of curly, done the same way as Kate Hudson, as Penny Lane in Almost Famous. And she told me she used to get into bars and stuff sometimes. They let her right in because they thought she was Kate Hudson. So maybe hopefully Linda Hamilton's twin got some perks like that out of it.
Yeah.
The deal. She passed away on, I believe, August 22nd at 63, and no cause was given other than it was unexpected. Ben Cross, the actor most famous for starring in Chariots of Fire, he was also in HBO's first ever miniseries in 1984 called The Far Pavilions. He died on August 18th, 72 years old from cancer. Trini Lopez, singer and an actor from The Dirty Dozen. I looked it up. There are 4 members of the Dirty Dozen that were actually The Dirty Dozen that are still alive. Donald Sutherland, Jim Brown, Stuart Cooper, and Colin Maitland. So there were 5, and now they're down to 4.
Wow, okay. He did If I Had a Hammer, which was a great song. And then another song which is called Lemon Tree. And I didn't even realize it until today, and it clicked that his song Lemon Tree, I don't know if he wrote it, but it was used as a really big jingle in the 70s for Lemon Pledge dusting. It was but yeah. He definitely hit pop culture a couple of times. He did.
Good for him.
If it was his song, it might have probably made him some decent money.
He passed away on August 11th. He was 83, and unfortunately, he passed away from COVID. Joe Ruby, the co-creator of Scooby-Doo, passed away on August 26th. He was 87. It was natural causes. Justin Townes Earle, who was a singer-songwriter and the son of singer-songwriter Steve Earle, passed away on August 20th at the age of 38, and they say it's probably a drug overdose. He had a long... He supposedly had been using drugs since he was 12.
He was young. He was really young. Yeah. That's back to Joe Ruby for just a second.
Sure.
So he started with Disney. He went to Hanna-Barbera and co-created Scooby-Doo, Dynamite, Dog Wonder, and in 1976, capitalizing on Jaws, they started a cartoon called Jabberjaw, and it was a cartoon shark. So he was that came out in 76. So Jaws 75, Jabberjaw 76. The popularity.
Sharks, man.
It was an industry.
Yeah, really. Well, and on all the stuff, SNL, the spoofs that SNL did with like Land Shark, and John Belushi played Dreyfus in a sketch, and all that. Yeah. Cliff Robinson, NBA All-Star and contestant on Survivor. Passed away on August 29th. He was only 53 of lymphoma.
He was what? He was in Survivor in 2013. He has a stroke. This guy is, he's an NBA. I mean, he's the top physical fitness, and
he's like 6'10". Yeah.
Yeah. And then having a stroke, and then he had a tumor removed from his jaw. I mean, it was just like, man, it's too bad. What a rough life for someone who you think should be on the top of things.
Linda Manns, primarily an indie film actress, mostly in the 70s and 80s. Best known for being in Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven when she was only 15, which she also narrated, and Dennis Hopper's Out of the Blue, kind of a cult hit. She passed away on August 14th. She was 58, and she had been suffering from pneumonia and lung cancer. And Raymond G. Allen Sr., who was Uncle Woody from Sanford and Son, passed away on August 10th. He was 91. He'd been in a care facility for a while. It was a respiratory illness, but they said not COVID.
Interesting.
And then lastly, Wayne Fontana, a British pop star in the 60s who had a big hit with Game of Love, passed away on August 6th. He was 74, and that was also cancer.
Now that guy, I was doing some reading about him today, and he... I'll just read this straight off. He fought a bankruptcy, but was arrested after police were called by bailiffs who went to his home in Derbyshire, poured petrol onto the hood of the bailiff's car, set it alight with him still inside. Then he was put in custody in 2007. he came to court dressed as the Lady of Justice with the sword and the scales and the cape and the crown. And he was sentenced to 11 months in prison for setting that car on fire, but was released because he had served time under the Mental Health Act. He was arrested again for over an unpaid speeding fine. He continued to perform. I guess when he was in that group with the Mindbenders, he quit. And he quit after they had a hit song with "Game of Love." They had a couple of singles after that bombed. He quit on stage, like while they were on stage. He just walked off the stage. This guy was something else.
Wow.
It's fascinating. Fascinating man.
Crazy. All right.
But there was one other guy I just wanted to mention. I just found out today, and a good friend of mine who was an author. His name is E.J. Fleming, and E.J. wrote books, fantastic books on Eddie Mannix. This George Reeves. He wrote a book about Carol Lombard, Paul Byrne. In fact, it was by E.J. And I met the owners of the Paul Byrne house, the J. Sebring house, at the same time. He also wrote a book called The Movie Land Directory, which is this fantastic encyclopedia of celebrities' addresses. He was also big into bullying and into fighting bullying. He wrote a book called Death of an Altar Boy that's supposed to be made into a movie soon about abuse by clergy. And he also wrote a book about Wallace Reed. But I found out today from his brother. I just talked to EJ like last week, but his brother told me that EJ passed away yesterday. I looked at his Facebook page, and he wrote a post yesterday and posted something, so it must have been sudden. But it's a real bummer. So EJ Fleming, a fantastic historian, author, and rest in peace, EJ, man. You're a good guy.
Peace, yeah. Wow.
It's time for the main feature.
What do you got there, Scott? You have a poster that says
shark
avoid
attacks. Get hit by lightning. This is the cover of a magazine I still save from 1977. It was called Cracked, which was a knockoff Mad magazine. And this was the this was the issue that came out when Jaws came out. We sink our teeth into Jaws. So the reason I hung on to this thing for how many years? 45 years? So no, 35 years? Is that what it is? No, 40.
45, yeah. 45.
40.
Sorry.
You know, Jesus Christ.
Hate to break it to you.
Yeah. But, God, that means in 5 years it's going to be my 50th high school. That can't be right. 80? No, 40 years. 75, 85, 95, 05, 15. 45 years.
I was born in 78, and I'm 42 years old, Scott. So, yes.
So in 5 years, it's going to be my 50th high school reunion? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Back to 19... And I got this, too. When Jaws 2 came out, I saved
the
that.
Mad magazine? That's awesome.
Yeah,
and you
this is
kept
Jaws
them. That's
2,
great.
Though. I got a couple of other things I'll show you while we're talking about people. Oh, we did talk already about Peter Benchley, and I did get this book plate from Peter Benchley.
Oh, right on.
But I got a couple other things I'll show you as we're talking.
And folks, just so you know, we do release the video version of these podcasts on Scott's YouTube channel, his dearly departed YouTube channel. Usually 2 or 3 days. Usually 2 or 3 days after the audio version comes out. So.
I'm just assuming everyone can see what we're talking about. So yeah. But anyway, yeah, Cracked magazine and Mad magazine, they were the best. Mad's still around, isn't it? Or did they stop publishing Mad? I think they stopped recently.
I don't. I can't remember. They've only gone to digital or something. Yeah, I don't know. It was still big when I was in high school.
Mad magazine, yeah, it was
still big in the 90s.
It was really something. Yeah. So the book Jaws came out in '74, and but before the book was even released, the movie rights were already sold to Universal. Richard Zanuck and David Brown were the producers, and David Brown's wife was Helen Gurley Brown, who was the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine for like 40 years. I mean, she was the one who did the old, sex quizzes in Cosmo and stuff like that. Helen Gurley Brown was behind all that stuff. And one of her writers in Cosmo gave her a clip from Jaws and said, "This is the greatest thing I've ever read," gave it to her husband, and that's really how Jaws got published. So the rights to Jaws were sold before the book was even released, the film rights to, which is kind of interesting.
And Peter Benchley said he sold the film rights for $150,000, which at that time would have been about $450,000 in today's dollars. I think no more. Yeah. It would have been about $750,000. I mean, there's a lot of money. And he said he only had like $300 in his bank account, and he was just like completely blown away that they paid that much for it.
Yeah, I wonder if there were any kind of rights or something, because I know that he when they were making all the sequels, they contacted him, and he just stopped dealing with it and just had a straight like $75,000 fee for all the sequels. So
sure.
He must have had still some ownership of the characters or the story of some sort.
Most of the time in those types of situations, you have he gets a set amount of money for sequels, regardless of whether he's involved or not.
I hope he got residuals. I really do, because
no doubt, I'm sure he did. Yeah,
I hope so. But man, what a man! No one saw that one coming.
And speaking of the writers, both the screenwriters, him because he helped to write the screenplay, and then Carl Gottlieb, who also came in to help with the screenplay. Both of them appear in the film as actors. Peter is the television newsman who does the presentation from the beach with the crowd behind him, and then Carl plays Meadows, the reporter. So they both played journalists, reporters in the movie. I thought that was kind of interesting. The two writers. The shadow
and the shape of a killer shark. That was I love that newspaper voice. But Gottlieb, I got this from him, which is kind of cool. He wrote it to Dearly Departed Tours. It's a Gottlieb. He signed it for me. And,
nice! It's a sheet of paper with or a printout of some photos of him in the movie.
He says really to Dearly Departed, keep up the good work, but leave me out of it. Which is, but he was originally supposed to be really a big part. He was, I think, originally hired as an actor, and then Spielberg kind of got him on to be the dialogue editor, on the script. So. But he was, he told this in an interview I was listening to, that he originally had like one of the, it was Lorraine Gary who played Mrs. Brody, and there was one other actor who got like the next billing. They were like the three of them on the screen, and his part got edited down to almost nothing.
Right. And on that note, Robert Shaw, who of course famously played Quint. He was also a writer and a playwright in his own right, in addition to being an actor. And that famous monologue that he does about the USS Indianapolis, which is Spielberg's favorite part of the movie, Robert Shaw helped with the rewrite of that monologue. Several writers took a crack at it, and then he kind of got the last pass on it and kind of, I think, put it in his own words to some extent. That amazing, amazing monologue he helped write, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's an amazing part of the movie. Most definitely, it's really moving.
Yeah, it's great because it shows his character's backstory, and at the same time gives you insight into the horror of being eaten by a shark. Kind of serves.
And if you were to tell somebody that was really what happened to Robert Shaw, they'd believe it. It was that convincing. He was really, really convincing.
Yeah.
And there's a scene. I think he shows up twice in the movie, but when Shaw shows up in the movie and he drags his fingernails across the chalkboard and he leaves, he's got an assistant with him that hardly anyone ever remembers. I always call him Ed Gein because he looks like the killer Ed Gein with this plaid sort of hat. And you see him walk out with Quint from that little room when he says, "I'll kill the shark for $10,000. And I think you might see him again in a distant shot, but he was somebody that got edited out of the film almost completely. There's only one outtake of him with Robert Shaw saying something like, I quit, Mr. Quint, or I'm not going on that ship with you guys, or something like that. But there was a guy that got almost completely cut out of it, except for that weird scene where they show him walking down the hallway with Robert Shaw leaving that meeting. Is interesting.
Whoa.
But this movie, only because I saw it so gajillion times, that those weird little, it's like Rocky Horror, it's like some people with Star Wars, it's just, it's one of those things that there's so much of it that I could, references that are iconic, really, as far as I'm concerned.
On a similar note, Lorraine Gray, who played Brody's wife, she that character in the book was originally had a bigger role, and actually there was a whole love triangle thing with her and Richard Dreyfuss's character where they were having an affair behind Brody's back, and wisely the filmmakers decided not to put that in the movie and just to stick to let's just stick to shark hunting and not have this extra side stories going on.
Yeah, Lorraine Gary, she's an interesting person. Let's talk about her a little bit later on with the lesser players. But yeah, she's got an interesting story to her. She does. And just because we'll throw it away just quickly, since we're on the movie, well, she could be considered an extra, I suppose. But the opening scene, the iconic opening scene with the girls swimming, Susan Backlini was her name, and she was someone that was hired. They saw her do a swimsuit model, and as modeling a swimsuit, and they hired her to do this. But she was also, the logistics of that. And you probably watched the movie, so you saw how they pulled her under, and they had people with harnesses and pulling her all over the place. But that was a terrifying way to start that movie because it was so violent, so absolutely violent, and the most terrifying bit about it is when she just went underwater and it was silent, and that was just jarring how effective that was with the it's like they used it in Alien, where they're all in the room and they hear the woman screaming in the back and then you just hear it cut off. It was just the most terrifying thing because there is no sound. It was, she was, and Susan Backlini, actually.
What do you have?
I got a Chrissy picture, and she signed it to Scott, and she wrote, "Eat me."
It's the photo of her getting attacked in the water and screaming. That's amazing.
Yeah,
wow.
she was cool.
She was a stunt woman. And Spielberg apparently wasn't too keen on hiring her because she needed to actually act also. But then when they did the scene on the beach first, and Spielberg was happy with what she did, and so it was good from there. And they dragged her around the water and dragged her under using cables attached to her.
I think that was another one of those day to night scenes when they show her running into the water.
Where they underexpose it to make day for night.
Yeah, that was. I'll never forget seeing it for the first time. When you see her, it's all a shark movie, and you see her going into the water, you see her leg just going under, and everyone goes, "Is that it? Is that it? Is that the shark attack?" It is. That was wow. Yeah, I can't stress to you how big that movie was. I'm sure you know. But and you saw since we talked about it the last time, you bought the 4K version of it. The dialogue is spectacular. You can hear every single vowel that comes out of people's mouths, every single sign that was there you can read. It was just it was like watching it with glasses for the first time.
Their production sound mixer won the Oscar for it. And there's a great story in the documentary when the boat sinks. And the first time it sank, it sank fast, and they had to rescue the actors, and their cameras went down with the boat and everything, and they're yelling, "Oh, get the actors!" And the boats are moving in to get the actors off, and all of a sudden there's the sound guy standing there, and he's got his mixer or whatever in his hands, and he says, "Fuck the actors, save the sound department." and you see him just going down into the water, but they were able to salvage the film that they shot that day because film is often processed in saline, in salt water. And the cinematographer was like, "Look, I think this film can be salvaged if we get it to a lab right now." And sure enough, they were able to salvage those shots even though the cameras got submerged. So that's kind of wild. Yeah.
God, the losses on this movie are incredible. The stuff that they went through, the closing down the island and renting all the places and building sets and and everything that went wrong, and the mechanical shark, and paying overtime for all those actors, and that's crazy.
And Spielberg said when they sing that song, the drunken song, inside the cabin of the ship, the "I Want to Go Home" song, Spielberg said that the crew was crying. He looked over and the script girl was crying because they really wanted to go home, and it made them homesick to hear that song.
That's wild.
Yeah,
I listened to that for the first time today, or yesterday. I went and found it, the original version of it. It was just one of those old, sing-song type, for sailors, and I'd never heard the proper, sung version of it. It was interesting. I just knew it from the movie. Or the Spanish Ladies song. That's the Farewell and Adieu to You Fine Spanish Ladies. That's the song I'm thinking of. It's not Show Me the Way to Go Home. That's a lot more famous. But the Spanish Ladies song was one that was like one of those sing-song naval, sailor type of things.
Right.
It was. It's cool. Very, very cool. And he grew up in northern Scotland in the Orkney Islands, although it's not where he was born. But the Orkney Islands are like the northernmost part of Scotland. Like, you get to the northernmost part of the land, and then you take a ferry up to the Orkney Islands.
Oh, wow.
And I spent a weekend up there once, and it was really interesting. It's something that people should go to spend a day, but not overnight for a couple of days. It wasn't, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's wild. I mean, they have like cities that were built like literally 5,000 years ago. And they have... about 20 years ago, they removed all the children from the island because they thought they were being possibly sacrificed. And they have these old pyramids. And we went into one of these pyramids, and the woman who is giving us the tour of this pyramid was saying, they were saying, this is where the rituals would take place. And the woman, one of the little girls, say, "Oh, is this where they would pray?" She goes, "Well,
sure."
There was all kinds of crazy stuff up there in Orkney Islands.
That was part of it.
Yeah, but this is where they would pray, right? Yeah.
Pray for it to stop. What is it with you in places like that? Remember we went to Ballarat and Death Valley, and it was talking about the girl being strung up? Jeez, man.
Yeah, it was weird, but it was really cool because they took a lot of old ships up there and they scuppered them. They just blew them up and they just laid there on the side of like you're driving on a road, and next to you is these like almost freighters laying on their sides, and now they're like natural habitats for sea life. But it was a really, the Orkney Islands. All respect to everyone that lives there. I mean, no disrespect, but their children were taken away, proving that nothing happened. I mean, they were put back. It was a terrible thing. There have been documentaries about this terrible thing that happened when they took the children away. But there was enough in people's minds for them to do that, and there was a history of that, and literally cities that are 5,000 years old, like Martians and stuff. It was fascinating, man. Orkney, fascinating place, but anyway, great place for a couple hours.
So that's Robert Shaw, his home place, right? Is that what we're?
Yeah, it's where he grew up. It's not where he was born. It's not where he died. But it's where he grew up. Yeah.
So he was in The Sting. He was in A Man for All Seasons. He was in From Russia with Love, and many more. Probably most famous, obviously, for Jaws.
Yeah. Sean Connery thought that he was like the most accomplished actor. I mean, he was Shakespearean. Robert Shaw was, but Sean Connery, just said that he was the strongest and most well-conditioned person I've ever met in this lifetime. He didn't break a sweat in our fight scene from Russia with Love, and I was exhausted from it. So I thought there was, and he almost didn't do Jaws. He didn't want to do Jaws, but his wife and his secretary decided, sort of convinced him after reading it that it's something that he should do. Just kind of interesting.
And famously, Richard Dreyfuss didn't want to do Jaws and turned Spielberg down the first time he got the offer.
Yeah.
And then kind of famously, after turning it down, Dreyfuss went to the premiere of one of his films up in Canada, and I guess it was the first time he'd been the leading man. And it was the first time seeing himself on screen as the lead character. And he hated himself so bad in the movie and thought he was so terrible that he was like, my career is going to be over. I better take whatever I can get. And he called Spielberg back and was like, if that part is still available, I will take it. And that is how that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not surprised. He's a curious individual, Richard Dreyfuss, and he's been in a ton of things. I mean, he's in The Graduate. He was in Valley of the Dolls. I mean, he's been in a ton of movies in the '60s and the '70s. American Graffiti. I guess Robert Shaw and he had there was a lot of tension on the set between the two of them.
Really?
Because Robert Shaw knew how to get under people's skin, and he would totally mess with Richard Dreyfuss. And Richard Dreyfuss does not have, I don't think, the ability to laugh at himself. And he also, he doesn't. Because he would say, I was a couple of documentaries that came up and where Robert Shaw said, we're talking about Richard Dreyfuss being fat and out of shape, and you're an embarrassment. And he goes, I bet you couldn't do 20 good push-ups. And Richard Dreyfuss goes, yes, I could. Just like really raise, just really jump into it, And Robert Shaw totally knew he was messing with them, and he would just rise to it. He just knew how to get right under his skin. And Robert Shaw was really famously a drinker, but I don't think he was ever a drinker enough to screw up a movie. I don't think he was obnoxious. Yeah, there was the one time when they were doing that Indianapolis speech, and he asked Spielberg if he could do it drunk or after having a couple of drinks, because he thought it would be more in the character. But after they lost that day of filming because he took it a little bit too far. But
and Dreyfuss told a story. He said that everybody got seasick at some point on the shoot. Every actor got seasick at some point. And there was one scene where Shaw had to do a thing where he looks back and yells at Dreyfuss's character. He says one line, but he has to yell it at him. I can't remember what the line was, but Dreyfuss said he was super seasick that day to the point where you couldn't even touch him. It would hurt him just to be touched. And they were just like, there's no way he's going to get this. And he goes, they finally got him to sit down, and he just went, "Argh!" And he does it, and then they go action, and he freaking yelled so loud that they all jumped back. And then Spielberg was like, cut, print, and then Shaw immediately like collapsed again, like, oh. And they were like, okay, we got it, moving on.
Did you see that Jaws outtake with the blood capsule, where he was, they were filming him getting eaten by the shark, and then one of the cuts, one of the ones they didn't use, had a too large of a blood capsule for him to bite down on. It was huge, and it just got into his eye. You couldn't even see his eye socket. It was just puddled. It was kind of funny.
That's hilarious.
But he died. What? He died in 1978 driving. He had a heart attack and got out of his car and dropped dead in front of his wife and kid.
Yep, died right on the side of the road. He August 28th, 1978. He was only 51.
It's really, that was a shocker. That was a real surprise, because I think he only did one movie after that.
After Jaws?
I forget the name of it. Yeah. Avalanche Express. He had just completed Avalanche Express, and so, Jaws is his legacy, I guess. But it's interesting for someone to have a career like that for probably 30, 40 years at that point to. No, I'm exaggerating. Probably about 25 years to be your thing. Dreyfuss is the same way almost. I mean, Dreyfuss has done some amazing things. Won an Academy Award too for Best Actor. But people will always be the Jaws. He'll always be the Jaws guy.
Yep. Yeah. For me, he's the Jaws guy, and he's one of the other Spielberg movies he did, which is Close Encounters, which is totally on his shoulders. That movie. And then he did what's considered kind of a lesser Spielberg film, Always.
I like that movie. That was a really good movie.
I liked it a lot too. Yep, I totally like that.
Yeah, it's a very tug at your heartstrings, good movie. I like that.
He plays the ghost of the kind of smoke eaters. Is that what they're called, or whatever? The guys that fly the planes that dump the water on forest fires. It was really cool. I think John Goodman's in it.
He's he's another one. It's like really temperamental, just not very. He's also Stand By Me, the narrator in Stand By Me, which I love.
Right.
But yeah, he's always really temperamental, and it's like a crapshoot if you go up to him as a fan and say something to him. And he's only done like one or two interviews about Jaws, and he did the one of the autograph shows, and he was like, these guys are selling their autographs for $30-$40. He was charging like $150. He's just being a total douche about it. I mean, it's his thing. He's the goods. That's his right. But it was just like he knows his worth.
I saw Richard Dreyfuss on the Sony lot one time because I worked at Sony for a couple of years. I saw him outside my office one time. Having a conversation. He probably just had a meeting or something, and I didn't recognize him because I hadn't seen him in so long. And he's very short, and he put on weight. He was kind of a heavy-set guy. I was the voice. I heard the voice and was like, "That's Richard Dreyfuss." And I looked out, and I was like, "Oh, there he is." And I did not walk up to him, but his son is very active on Twitter and is, I believe, a journalist. And I feel like every other tweet his son does is some knock on his dad for being terrible with money and all the bad business decisions he made with his money. It's kind of like Stan Lee. Stan Lee could have made potentially, hundreds of millions of dollars or a very large amount of money off the Marvel movies. And the reason he didn't make so much is because he sold off a lot of the rights back in the 90s when Marvel was in kind of some money troubles. And it was before technology was good enough to really do good superhero movies out of most of their characters that they had. So he ended up missing out on a lot of stuff. He sold, I think he got like $10 million or something like that at the time. And you can imagine he potentially could have been a billionaire had he held on to it for another,
kidding.
For another 15 years. Yeah. It's crazy. And
Dreyfus, he had, here's another association that that always comes up. I think it was 1978, or maybe even actually in the 80s, he was nearly killed in a car accident. He was traveling northbound on Benedict Canyon Boulevard, and he flipped his car and hit some palm trees, and nearly died. And they found, I think it was Percodan in his pockets or something like that. But yeah, that was right on Benedict Canyon Boulevard.
Wow.
And, but you were talking about the son. And the son I was going to bring up in a little bit, Richard Dreyfuss's kid, because he was floating a theory that this is really nerdy about the movie. Ben Gardner, who's who's one of the characters in the movie, a minor character, it was Ben Gardner's head that popped out of the bottom of the boat. And Ben Gardner was a local. The actor that played him was a local in Martha's Vineyard or in Massachusetts and was hired. But you know how? So Richard Dreyfuss is underwater and he gets to the boat and he pulls the shark tooth out, and then Ben Gardner's head falls out. Well, the theory that Richard Dreyfuss's son was floating was that Ben Gardner was actually killed by Quint and not by the shark. And it's because Quint was jealous. Quint wanted to get the shark. Ben Gardner was out shooting or trying to catch the shark. And they had I know there's a scene in the movie where Ben Gardner is getting onto the ship and Quint is going by and does glance at him. But the one thing that really stood out is that Ben Gardner's, severed head falls out from the ship, but it's in the ship. Right. So if the shark got him.
So how did he die?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the one thing.
That's
there are a couple of things that defy logic. You have to let go in the movie because they're like, wait, that's just not that's not possible. There was a hole in the boat, but Ben Gardner's head was in the boat. So there's the thought that Quint is actually murdered Ben Gardner. It's a theory.
And Quint had 10,000 reasons to do it.
Yeah. Hook, line, and
sinker. $10,000 on the line. You can kind of see where his character motivation might be. That's really an interesting theory.
It's one of those cool kind of weirdo conspiracy. That's interesting things.
Right.
It's like the Grease Ghost story.
So you just mentioned Richard Dreyfuss flipping his car in Benedict Canyon. So while researching a show I've been producing, in 1968. Jimi Hendrix had his first real money. He decided he wanted to buy a Corvette. So he's in Cleveland, Ohio. He buys a Corvette, but it's kind of a special order one. So it's a 69 Corvette in Le Mans blue metallic paint. He's on tour. It catches up with him when he gets to New York. And then they paid a roadie to do what they called a bonsai run, driving his Corvette from New York to Los Angeles for him. So it would be there for him when he got back to L.A. He comes back to L.A. He was living in Benedict Canyon, and he promptly totaled his Corvette in Benedict Canyon.
Really?
Yep.
What? That was in 69 or 68?
It was sometime in October of 1968 when he got back from his tour. And there was an alternate story that he wrecked it in Hawaii, but it was never in Hawaii, and he wrecked a totally different car, like a rental car in Hawaii, when he was there performing. But yeah, he totaled his Corvette in Benedict Canyon in October of 1968. And then there's another claim that it actually happened in Topanga Canyon also, but Benedict is the most widely accepted location for it. And then he ended up ordering a replacement Corvette, which he still owned when he died.
Interesting. But Topanga, closer to the ocean is a bit windy, but Benedict is totally windy, where Topanga's not that much so. Interesting.
Right. Either while leaving or going from his own house, or a party that someone else was having in Benedict or something like that. But yeah, he ran it into like a rocky embankment and totaled it.
Wouldn't that be interesting if it was like Sebring's house or something?
Right. Yeah, because the owner of
makes sense.
Sebring's house said the owner of Sebring's house did say that the Doors were living up there at around that time, and so it may be on that same little street.
Yeah, I mean, and also Sebring was one of the stylists who could do Black Guy's hair. He would, he did Sammy's hair. He did, so it's interesting. I wonder about that. That's something I'm definitely going to look into.
But there's some cool photos of him in his Corvette. There's video or old film footage of the blue Corvette kind of driving by down the road, and then the one he got to replace it with, I think, was silver. And then that car ended up getting sold and resold, and some guys in New York or New Jersey ended up with it, and they didn't know what they had, and they modified it and turned it into this big race car, and then ended up parting it out. They sold it and used that money to start an auto parts business, which they then ran successfully. So it's kind of got an interesting storyline behind it. But yeah.
Sure. Wow.
A lot of those cars, we tried to track down Jim Morrison's famous Mustang called the Blue Lady, and similar thing. A lot of times, it didn't really mean that much to them because they were rich rock stars, and it was just a toy. Jim Morrison wrecked his
and also for 30 years nobody cared.
Right.
It's like those iconic costumes at MGM that were just in mothballs.
And they're minor side stories to these people's lives. They're not the big things that they did. You know what I mean? So it just kind of gets lost to history because of that, I think.
Yeah, Janis Joplin's little Porsche that ended up, in her thankfully her brother still had it, but it was all beaten up and in the garage in a field or something like that. So it's nobody cares. I mean, but that was iconic too because it was all painted that way. It was like paisley painted or something.
Right, it was such a cool paint job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison's Blue Lady Mustang, he wrecked so many times that they're pretty sure he finally just totaled it. And it was probably crushed and hauled away and forgotten about. Yeah. But it's in that great documentary that was done about him. Has some really awesome 16 millimeter footage of him driving on the desert, like in the Mojave or something, in that Mustang and just hot rodding it around and doing donuts in the dirt and stuff with it. Yeah, really cool. All right. What next?
Well, Amity is a summer town, and we need summer dollars. We're going to talk about Murray Hamilton.
Yes. Mayor Vaughn.
He had some of the best lines in the movie. He really did. I mean, the one with like, you yell Barracuda, everyone's like, huh? What? You yell Shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July. I love that. He was really iconic, and I didn't realize until studying him a little bit more that he was Mr. Robinson in The Graduate. Yeah, he was great as Mayor Vaughn, and he was also in he was in Amityville Horror. He was in Jaws 2, and he was also in legit The Anatomy of a Murder, which I love that movie, an FBI story. Yeah, so he'd been in a lot of really accomplished actor, and but of course always going to be Jaws. And he had that jacket that he wore. It was a blue jacket with little anchors on it. That jacket has its own Facebook page. It's called Mayor Vaughn's Jacket. And, I just love that. I love weird things like that. But yeah, he was. And it's funny too. Actually, as we record this, I was going through my Facebook feed today. Eddie Deason, we talked about from Grease. He played Eugene in the movie Grease. He wrote today, I want to acknowledge the death of my friend Murray Hamilton. The death anniversary is today, actually, of Murray Hamilton.
September
and he says
1st.
We worked together on 1941, and he was the most generous actor that I ever worked with, and he was a terrific guy. So we record this on the death anniversary of Murray Hamilton, who died in 1986 on this day.
And what did he die from?
He died from I don't know. He was only 63. Oh, lung cancer. Lung cancer. Okay. And he was married to a woman named Terry DeMarco, there was a group during the big band era called the DeMarco Sisters, and his wife was one of the DeMarco sisters.
Oh wow.
But yeah, he died September 1st of lung cancer.
Wow.
R.I.P. Mayor Vaughn. Mm-hmm. That's a great character. It is a really great character.
And it became that whole scene kind of became relevant again with the COVID thing, because the whole thing with reopening the beaches too soon, it's like history repeats itself almost, right, from Jaws, with whether or not we're reopening too fast or not. People started drawing parallels and comparing certain people in our government to the mayor and all that in Jaws and everything, and not wanting to let the economy go to hell, and we're a summertime, we need summer dollars. Is that what the line was? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he's great. So Jaws and Jaws 2. The next guy we're talking about is Roy Scheider.
Of course.
Good old Roy.
Good old Brody.
He was a cool guy. He was just he was a neat guy. I liked him very much. And French Connection, I think, is how Spielberg found him, I think.
Right, it is. Spielberg loved him in the French Connection and thought he'd be great.
And he was perfect for it. The line about we're going to need a bigger boat, there's all kinds of stories about that line and where it came from. Now, he told me, yes, that he improvised it.
And the writer also, I think one of the writers, also confirmed that.
But then Gottlieb said that Roy told him that it was actually in the script at one point, in a different scene, in a different time. And there was a joke on the set because when they were doing all the scenes on the ocean, they had one sort of ship that carried all the equipment. And the joke was, we need a bigger boat, we need a bigger boat. So occasionally people would just say that and throw it into the movie. So there was, or throw it into the lines and not be used in the movie.
Sure, and eventually they found a spot to put it, yeah.
Yeah, and he just said it, I guess. Now, he may have improvised it by inserting it at that point.
Right.
But I guess it was a throwaway, kind of a standing joke on the set that we need a bigger boat.
It's also a famously misquoted line, because he doesn't actually say we're going to need a bigger boat. He says you're going to need a bigger boat, because he says it to Quint. And it's one of those lines that has been kind of reappropriated as we're going to need a bigger boat, which I think is cool because it's become a stand-in line for we're in over our heads. It's what we're going to need a bigger boat. What we're doing right now is not going to work. I think it's cool. But it's just like, do you feel lucky, punk? Like the lines like that have been kind of twisted and misquoted over the years.
Yeah, Mae West, come up and see me. She never said that. There was another. There's a few of those like that. I love that where I never said that. I forget. Yeah, there was a couple of them like that. That's an interesting segment we should think about doing.
That would be cool.
Lines
that
are
misquotes.
Quoted or misquoted. Yeah.
Honestly, almost every really famous line is a misquote that people like to say is not how it was said in the movie.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the public polished and improved the line as written originally by the screenwriter, made it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now my mind is going on about more of those examples, but Roy was I got to spend an evening with him back in it was actually 1999 because I had him autograph my Jaws poster, and actually this was published in a magazine, Empire magazine. And when I brought this out and asked him to autograph it for me, he's like, "That's really valuable. That's like the original poster." And I'm like, "No, I just got it out of a magazine, really." But this is I know what makes this the real poster. But that's the one he was really kind of impressed with having. But
what did he write? Did he write anything?
Yeah, well, this was to me and my ex. And he just said had a really good time because he was a guest on my ex's show.
Oh, so it was like one of those kind of green room hangout situations?
Yeah. And the only thing I remember really that he talked about, I could say he was just a decent guy, just a really nice guy, up for the joke about Jaws, up for talking about it. He knew which side of the bread was buttered or whatever that expression is.
Right.
And but the one thing I remember, he was talking to me. He talking about Helen Hunt. And they were really, really close. He says we spent Thanksgivings together. I'm like, I don't know where that even came from, but he did mention that to me. But he was just a really decent, nice, funny guy.
Because he and Helen Hunt would be of different generations. She's quite a bit younger than him. I wonder what the connection was.
But then she'd been an actress since she was probably 10. So maybe maybe it was a New York thing. I don't know. But so he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And that's cancer that of the blood cells, and he had a bone marrow replacement. In Thanksgiving 2007, he spent it with friends who were still talking about how great he looked. I imagine Helen Hunt was one of those friends. He went jogging near his home in December in Sag Harbor, New York, and collapsed. And he was flown to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences. It was in Little Rock, and that's where he died on February 10th of 2008 of a staph infection brought on by the cancer. Wow. 75. So it sounds like a lengthy, awful. Not that deaths are not awful, but it's too bad.
He was also in Sequest.
Oh, that's right.
Let's not forget.
Wasn't Jonathan Brandis in that too? That kid that committed suicide.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, it's Jonathan Brandis, who hung himself in the hallway outside his apartment while his friends were inside his apartment, like hanging out. I thought this was kind of interesting. Originally, Spielberg supposedly wanted Lee Marvin to play Quint, and Lee Marvin turned it down. Spielberg said because Lee Marvin was a very serious angler, a very serious fisherman, and he if he wanted to go on a boat, he wanted to go fish for real, like down in Mexico. He didn't want to. He said it didn't sound like a good time to make Jaws, and he was correct. He was totally correct. It would have been a very bad time, and you don't want someone on set that is already like that doesn't sound like a good time, and then he gets there and it isn't. And he originally thought of John Voight to play Hooper, Dreyfuss's character, and he also had considered Jeff Bridges. Spielberg was a huge fan of The Last Picture Show, and kind of felt he kind of wished he could cast that entire cast from that movie if he could. But he considered Jeff Bridges, and then the whole story with Dreyfuss turning it down and then coming back and accepting it happened.
Yeah, it's interesting because Lee Marvin, well, he would have been a good Quint. I don't think Jeff Bridges would have been a very good Hooper. Hooper, I mean, he had a good sense of humor, but not too much of a sense of humor. And
I thought
Dreyfuss
played him. I thought Dreyfuss played him perfectly.
John Voight, he's another one. He couldn't see smirking or cracking a joke, And,
I also like that Dreyfuss is kind of a small guy, and when he first gets off the boat on the dock, and what's the name of there was a local man that was the actor that's standing there when Dreyfuss steps on and kind of bumps into the guy. And he has to look
Ben
way
Gardner,
up at him.
I think it was Ben.
I think it was.
Ben
He has
Gardner,
to look up at him. He's like a full head or so taller than Dreyfuss is. I think that's. I don't know. I think that's important that he was kind of a smaller guy. Makes him a bit of an underdog in this situation. More of an underdog, trying to convince people of what they're up against.
Yeah. I didn't send it to you yet. That deep fake video that somebody put together with. There were probably clips from 20 movies in this thing, but it was called Jaws Beneath. And it was it wasn't a deep fake because they didn't computer generate him. They took Richard Dreyfuss going back to as an oceanographer coming out of retirement to go back to hunt a particular shark. It is a spectacular trailer. Whoever put this together, and I would it's like they should make this movie. It's a great idea. I would definitely check that out.
So on Gardner, Craig Kingsbury was the actor that played him, and Craig Kingsbury, according to Spielberg, was an actual local up there. He was a real guy. And Spielberg said you could do a whole book and a movie on this guy's life. He was that kind of a character. And Spielberg basically went to him and said, I want you to be in this movie. And he's like, I'll let you just make up all your dialogue. So when he's on the boat, when all the horde of guys are going out to go hunt the shark, and this Gardner's kind of leaning over the front of his boat as they go, and he's giving this speech, how you'll regret the day your father met your mothers or something like that. That's that was off the cuff. That was from his own mind. He was just that guy naturally.
That's funny. I mean, I could see the casting person in that movie. It would have been interesting to be in on those auditions because there were so many locals used, but people just can't act. You know what I mean? Just generally cannot act. I can't act.
It's really
you can
hard.
Put me, I can talk, but there's all those extras that are in the movie are like the old guy. That's some bad hat Harry. That guy, he just a guy that lived on the island, and he shows up about 4 times in the movie. In the city council meeting, he shows up at the parade at the beginning. He owns a bicycle shop. He shows up at the water with the man boobs. And so he shows in it quite a bit, and but you got to act. And that guy too, the Bad Hat Harry guy, he documented everything on the set. His name was Alfred Wilde. He played Harry Wiseman. He had his scrapbook was on auction, I don't know, a while ago. They were estimating it getting 25 grand. Tons of photographs of people posing on the set without him in it. You know, like proper like set stuff, pictures of the shark, every call sheet, everything. Everybody that was in the cast and the crew signed this little scrapbook for him. And that, I mean, every single person. It was pretty cool. That is pretty kind of fun to peruse. And he ended up being iconic because of Bryan Singer, you know, taking that line.
Bryan Singer naming his production company after him. Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of homages, Lorraine Gary supposedly, and I don't know if this is true, I saw this on Wikipedia, supposedly that is Marty McFly's mom's name, Lorraine, and Back to the Future was named after Lorraine Gary as a kind of a tribute to her.
Maybe so. I mean, sure, her husband was the head. Her husband was the head of Universal. It was a huge Universal movie, and in fact, he created Jaws: The Revenge for her. It was her movie, basically, and which is her finale too.
Because Scheider didn't come back for the third one; he was only in 1 and 2, right?
Yeah, the third one was worse than the last one, I think. The Jaws 3D with Dennis Quaid and Luke Gossett, that was pretty painful, like a SeaWorld kind of park thing. But Jaws: The Revenge, again, I'll still see it, but Jaws: The Revenge had Michael Caine in it, and that's the time Michael Caine says, "I will not say no to work." Right. Now he's being quite selective these days, but that was Lorraine Gary's last movie and her last acting gig. But it was terrible, but I loved it. You know, this time it's personal because the shark was after her personally. I love that stuff. But yeah,
this time it's personal for a shark. That's kind of interesting because they said one of the reasons that they were able to get the PG rating, they said on this, because they really fought hard. They were really close to getting an R rating. And what they pointed out was that this is animal violence. It's not human on human violence. No kid is going to go and eat somebody because they saw a shark do it in a movie. And so they said it's kind of like nature programming, basically, in a sense. You know, it's a shark killing people. It's not a person killing people. So, and then they made a few things. The main thing that they had to change was the bloody leg falling to the seafloor after the guy gets it bit off. That shot, they had to take off a few seconds of that shot and shorten it so it wasn't on screen.
It's really gruesome. That is really gruesome.
It's shocking, yeah. But I guess it went more like it hit the seafloor and then more blood kept pumping out of it, and they were like, no. once it hits the seafloor, cut away from it. And so that's what he did. And Spielberg was thrilled because he didn't know that they were going to let him use the shot at all. So he was like, great.
It's so funny because, I mean, the injuries when sharks come after people and the injuries that showed up in the movie are like... they don't correspond at all. It's just kind of some of it's quite a reach, but that's the fun of it. But that was pretty graphic. Yeah, that leg falling was something.
It was really realistic. Whoever made the leg, it looked really good. Good job.
Yeah, definitely. So Roy Scheider, he was at a funeral. 300 people attended. Benefit at Beverly Hills. Shirley MacLaine, Christopher Lloyd, another Universal star, Richard Anderson, Richard Dreyfuss attended, and well liked, well loved individual. Yeah. And so Lorraine, I was reading this book about Lorraine. This book called it was written by a woman who lived in Martha's Vineyard at the time of the filming.
On location on Martha's Vineyard is the name.
Edith Blake, and she wrote that that nobody really liked Lorraine Gary. Really? They said that the writers weren't pleased with her, and for some reason they kept writing her out of the script little by little. I'm quoting her, so that each day there was much less of her on the screen.
Well, and she was already disappointed that they had taken out, from the beginning, her love story with Dreyfuss's with Hooper.
Yeah.
She wanted to do that, and she was bummed that they reduced her role from the start. So that's interesting.
Yeah, they said that she worked with Spielberg before, but I did a bit of diving today, and I couldn't find the project that she and Spielberg worked for before. But Spielberg chose a lot of those people. Close Encounters, Richard Dreyfuss, some of the extras from the movie showed up in other movies that he worked on. A lot of people went from that to 1941. John Williams, the composer. I mean, that he became a Spielberg fixture on so many of Spielberg's. And then there's Jurassic Park and Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. and all those John Williams scores, and Lost in Space, the coolest theme song on TV, and also one called Land of the Giants. Those were John Williams compositions.
And John Williams said that Jaws took his career to another level because he'd already won an Oscar for Fiddler on the Roof. But on that, he had just done the arrangements. It wasn't like his original music. It was adaptation
or something.
Yeah, so he won for that, but he said Jaws was the first time he won an Oscar for his original music that he created. And it was just a dream match with him and Spielberg. Spielberg had always wanted to work with him, and it was just one of those lightning in a bottle situations. Spielberg had told him that he saw it as kind of like he saw the movie as kind of like a pirate type theme song. Like, this is an adventure that we're going on. And I don't.
Some of it is very that way. You can kind of
see some of that, yeah.
That year for my birthday, somebody gave me the soundtrack and the LP, and I remember it was like, oh my God, this is so cool! I love this movie so much. And looking at all the pictures on the back of the dramatic scenes in the movie, and there was like no screaming or anything. I was a little disappointed by that, but it ended up being one of my favorite soundtracks, because there's one called The Promenade that when they show, and we'll talk about this too at some point very soon today, about when there's that scene where they show all the tourists coming to Amity Island and on the ferry, etc. So that the music that accompanies.
Are we ready for that yet? Do you have more actors you want to talk about?
Yeah, I do actually. So there was. My friend Jack told me actually that I guess there was an executive, I think it was Brown Zanuck, Richard Zanuck, who worked at Fox. His wife, he wanted to have in the movie, in Jaws, and he was pushing really hard to get his wife to play Ellen Brody. But the head of Universal, who was Sidney Sheinberg, wanted his wife to play Ellen Brody. So there was a bit of a clash there. But as a compensation, she was given a role as Gloria Swanson's assistant in Airport 75, and she was also played in Planet of the Apes. But that's just sort of an aside that this particular actress, she was also in Cocoon actually.
Oh, really?
She was one of the mother of the little Wilfred's daughter. Yeah, she played Wilfred Brimley's daughter in Cocoon, who shows up with the little boy at the end of the movie saying, where's everybody?
Right. I was going to say, that's kind of like, when Kevin Costner got famously cut out of The Big Chill.
Yes.
And Lawrence Kasdan told him, look, I'll give you the next, big movie I do, and that was Silverado. And Kevin Costner had a great role in that, and helped springboard his career from then on. Yeah.
That is funny that all you see is like corpse feet in The Big Chill.
Yeah, and when they pull the sleeve down on him, and you see the sewn up slit marks, where he cut his wrists. Yeah, and that was it, because there were supposed to be flashback scenes of him, and Lawrence Kasdan realized that this just didn't work. Leaving the present and doing flashbacks of him alive didn't work. It was better for them to talk about him than to actually show him. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you imagine how mad you would be to get a role in that big of a movie with that big of a cast and then get cut out of it?
Just your feet. Just your feet and your arm, your wrist being shown. Yeah. There were a couple of other extras that deserve acknowledgement, only because we're still talking about the movie so many years later. I love Peggy Scott, and she has one of my favorite lines in the movie when she played the secretary at in the sheriff's office, or in Chief Brody's office, and she's the secretary coming in and saying, and the 9-year-old kids are karateing the picket fences.
Yes,
I just love her.
Right. I also love because story-wise, it sets up what a sleepy little nothing happens here town.
Yeah,
it is that's like their leading crime situation at that point, right?
She was
yeah,
she was another local.
Really?
The woman Lee Fierro, who played Mrs. Kintner, she just died last April 5th of COVID, but she was 91, and she played Alex Kintner's mother, who was wearing the black. She came from the funeral and said, "My son is dead. I just want you to know that." Yeah. So she just died. Her name was Lee Fierro. She was, I think, an acting teacher on the island on Martha's Vineyard, and there was a scene. Now, the kid who played Alex Kintner, the kid that got chopped up by, eaten by the shark, which is another one of those flaws that, like, within 10 seconds of him being killed, his chewed up raft shows up, still with blood, although it's still the ocean.
Somehow has already drifted in.
Yeah,
right.
with blood that did not get dissolved. But anyway, the restaurant he worked in had a hamburger called the Alex Kintner hamburger or something like that. And she was visiting. She was just there, and she said, "Well, this is kind of funny, but I played Alex Kintner's mother, and the Alex Kintner kid was actually there still." And they got, it's like the first time they'd seen each other since.
Wait a minute, there was a thing called
then.
the Alex Kintner hamburger?
Yeah, there's a restaurant in Massachusetts that was either operated by or owned by the kid who played Alex Kintner. The kid's name was Jeffrey Voorhees, who played Alex Kintner.
The actor. I was just going to say, if it's hamburger, that's a wildly inappropriate name, considering how that character died.
Well, that was the whole point.
Oh, is that the point? Jaws turned him into hamburger meat. All right.
Yeah. And there was another. Let's see, who else was there? Kingsbury, who played Ben Gardner. Chris Ribello, who played Mike Brody, who was Chief Brody, one of Chief Brody's son. In fact, he was the kid we just talked about who was in the water when that POV shot came by, and it was supposed to be the shark after the guy gets his leg chopped off.
My favorite shot. Yeah.
Yeah, he died. He died in 2000, November 30th. He was only 37 years old. He was deer hunting with friends, but he didn't die from deer hunting. He died of a massive heart attack while he was hunting with friends.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he got shot accidentally.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he said he got $138 a day. Most of the extras got $40 a day, but he had lines. He had the lines, Mama got bit by a vampire, at the beginning of it. And
so he was more of he was a featured extra, so he got a little extra money out of that. Yeah.
They showed him in the hospital, and so he had a few scenes. And let's see, Jane Courtney, who played Mrs. Taft, and that's another one of those really obscure ones, but I love, when she was when Quint is dragging his nails, she's the extra with the black hair and the glasses, and then somebody asks is that $10,000 reward cash or check, and she's like, "I don't think that's funny. I don't think that's funny at all." And she was also in Jaws 2 and Jaws the Revenge, and she was in Rosemary's Baby. An uncredited role in Rosemary's Baby as an extra at the party scene. Yeah, it's kind of cool. So she died in 2012 it didn't say what she died of. And then we talked about Alfred Wilde, who played Harry, as in Some Bad Hat. He died in 1998. He was like 110. And one of the things that I found interesting, and I'm joking about 110. He was quite old, but he was that old. Another one of the weird things I found was that they go over, they loop lines afterwards. They have voice people coming in. Either the actors re-loop their lines or re-record their lines in the studio because they came out kind of muddled on the sets. One of the people who did some of the re-looping or the looping was June Foray, and she was the voice actress who was most famous for being Rocky the Squirrel in the Bullwinkle movie.
Oh, wow.
She was in a ton of Hanna-Barbera cartoon characters, and she went in to re-record some of the children's lines in the beach scene. So I didn't even know that until really recently, and I thought I knew about a ton about it. But she was also the voice of the wife of the mayor in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland.
No kidding.
Yeah. So it's such a weird association. But June Foray, who just passed away about 2 years ago, was another one of those weird little kind of extras that wasn't actually in the movie. And there were a couple of scenes that were iconic and contrived. When the movie came out, and they're singing "Show Me the Way to Go Home," you hear the whale in the distance. When the movie first came out, it was this really weird noise that wasn't a whale noise. And then we re-released the movie the many times they have. I think it was the 30th anniversary that I have. Yeah, 30th anniversary. They released it and they changed it to a real whale noise. You know, and it's just like it was. The other one was more haunting. It was this weird kind of. Yeah, but now for this version, they put the old unreal whale noise back. So
they must have got blowback for it or something.
Yeah, purist, I suppose.
Since we're talking about sound effects, and we talked about Duel earlier, when the shark is blown up and dead and is floating down to the bottom, there is a sound that plays, kind of a roar, kind of a weird sound. It is the same sound that is played when the Duel truck goes off the cliff. And what it was...
is that one of those Spielberg touches that he decided to add, like a Hitchcock cameo?
What it was in Duel was it was a dinosaur roar from an old movie that Spielberg grabbed and used over the Duel truck as it's going over to kind of make it sound like it was an alive beast. And then he took that same sound effect and put it over the sound of the shark. And there's a little bit of an effect put on it so it's less obvious, but you do eventually hear it as the shark descends to the bottom with all the blood going out. Yep.
So a couple of things that were okay. There's a scene where they show the ship at night, day to night, and you see a shooting star. You see it twice actually. It's a total Spielberg touch though, and there's two of them actually. I don't know if there was originally two, but there's two in this new version.
Interesting.
Shortly afterwards.
I only know about the one.
Yeah, maybe it's because of the high definition, but there is a second one now, and but that was totally a Spielberg touch, which is a magical, wonderful touch.
Yeah, he said it wasn't intentional, and people have tried to derive meaning from it or whatever. And he said no, it just happened while they were filming, and he used that.
No, he inserted it. It was legit.
The main one he said was actually happened.
I don't know. I'm on a Jaws message board on Facebook, and that's like one of the first things people always ask, and they're like, no, it's not. It was something he put in there. Now maybe the second one was authentic, but I think the first one was something that Spielberg had actually put in purposefully.
It may be, yeah. And I do see. It's funny as you said this. I looked it up, and somebody is claiming that they believe it was added, despite what he may say.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe.
I do think it was, but in this new one, maybe because it really did happen and it showed up on the screen, the second one did, and they didn't show it. You couldn't see it well until this HD one happened, but
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Roy Scheider is kind of in close up, and in the background is just dark sky. It's kind of at night, and yeah, you clearly see a shooting star streak across. So,
God, there was another scene that was really just not just sort of suspending reality when the ship gets attacked by the shark when they're singing, and the shark is like pow 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 pow. It's like,
against it, yeah.
That's just not going to happen, is it? The shark is like he'll hit it once and loop around again, but it was like pow pow. Like it was a bit. You have to suspend a bit of reality there.
Right.
One flaw I noticed, and it was probably purposeful, was when Brody was typing out the death certificate, which does have Chrissy's death as July 1st, 1974, printed on it at the beginning of the movie. It doesn't say coroner's office, it's typed in corner, as in corner of the room, coroner's office. It's just probably a purposeful misspelling. And
interesting.
And then there's another thing that the fan boards always go crazy over, and that's the name of the dog that goes after the stick. The guy in the yellow shirt, and he throws and the dog, the Labrador. It's Pippet, and everyone always thinks it's Pippin, and that's like it's one of those nerdy message board things. But it's like people get really upset about it. It's like Pippet. It's called Pippet. Don't say Pippin. It's Pippet. It's like.
Spielberg also said that he had thought of for a time of doing I haven't seen Sugarland Express I admit to it. I need to watch it. But there's a scene in it where this old couple gets their car stolen, and they get left kind of on the side of the road. And Spielberg had the idea of putting that couple back in the movie and having them back in their car again in Jaws. And
that would have been good.
He wanted to do a scene with them at the beach, and where the old man is blowing up a little raft like they're going to go out in the water. And he decided that he was having so many challenges making the movie, it was difficult enough already. Like, don't add more on to his plate. So he decided not to do it. And there was another thing.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of the ending, in suspension of disbelief, Peter Benchley, who wrote the book had a different ending. The book had Jaws kind of just descending into the deep, weighted down, and
he just
disappearing.
died.
It was kind of boring, and he just kind of dies. Basically, kind of almost dies off camera. And Spielberg's like, we can't have it end that way. We got to have a big ending. And so Spielberg and the writers or whatever had come up with the idea of the air tank in the mouth and shoot it, and Benchley was just like, it's completely unbelievable. He was completely opposed to it. Sharks don't do that. A shark would not just bite it would not eat an oxygen tank from a diver. He says it's completely stupid and realistic. But then he admitted after watching the finished film that Spielberg was right, because he's like, Spielberg knew that by that point he had the audience in the palm of his hand.
Yeah.
And he could do anything and the audience would go along with it.
Yeah, and you needed that triumph at the end of the movie.
The thing blowing up, and you know that it's dead. It didn't survive that. Yeah.
When I watched it the other day again, I went frame by frame, and there's some curious chunks that go up in that explosion. And I couldn't make out what they were, but there was something at the water level, right at the surface, that looked like this. Like a raft almost that was over there. It was just...
Oh, interesting.
I don't know, but I went frame by frame to look for body parts, because he had just literally eaten Quint, like a couple minutes earlier.
And you see, like, flesh stuck in his teeth, too, in those final shots as well, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty gruesome. But, when he blew up, and then that shark is falling to the bottom, and it's a shark that's like, 1/4 of the size of the one that he just killed.
Right.
But, yeah... But so okay, let's talk about Stephen King's Kid.
Okay, so I found the exact moment where we see this part, and here's what happened. So, in the summer of 1974, in July, on July 26, 1974. A teenager walking her dog in the dunes on the north end of Cape Cod Island, north of Provincetown, stumbled across a dead body, a naked dead body of a woman who her hands had been cut off, her head had been almost completely cut off. She was face down, and she was laying on part of a light green beach towel. And her head was resting on a pair of folded jeans. And they said she was laying on one half of the beach towel, almost like someone else had been sitting next to her, like she'd been sharing the towel with somebody. And the left side of her skull had been bashed in. And she was estimated to have been there from anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks. They thought she was anywhere from 20 to 40 years old. She was about 5'6", 145 pounds. She had long auburn or reddish blonde hair, pink nail polish on her toenails. Some of her teeth were missing in addition to her hands missing. And they think that her head was cut off with something similar to like a military entrenching tool. Some have theorized that the fact that the hands were missing and the teeth were missing, that obviously the killer was trying to cover up her identity, and that the killer may have been someone that she knew that could be traced back to him, and that's why they wanted to cover up who she was. She has never been identified. She is known as the Lady of the Dunes. They don't even know who she is, much less who killed her. And they exhumed her body again in 2000 to try and identify her again. They still couldn't. And then a few years ago, this writer named Joe Hill, who is the son of iconic writer Stephen King, and who is also a writer himself, he got kind of obsessed with the case, and he was watching Jaws in a movie theater, and he'd never seen Jaws in a theater on a big screen before. And as he's watching it, he sees an extra in this scene, and it's at 54 minutes and 4 seconds into the movie, and it's a scene where people are unloading from the ferry. and you see a woman on the left side of the screen, on the far left. She has brown hair. She's wearing a blue bandana, which supposedly the body was also found. There was a blue bandana present. This woman has a blue bandana that she's wearing on her head, like over her hair, and she's got a white T-shirt on, and she's wearing jeans. So again, the body was found with blue jeans. And the body was found in July of 1974, which was, the film was being filmed at that time, and he thinks that she may be the victim of this murder, that she may be this Jane Doe that they found in the dunes. And
yeah, they exhumed her like 3 times.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I watched one of those true crime podcasts about it, and it was very interesting. Another one of those, I have to suspend belief for a little while, because the idea of somebody spotting somebody, this is a movie that, he's not even a nerd about. I'm not going to say he's not a nerd, because I don't know him. I don't know what he's like. But, sure. I mean, this movie's been around for 45 years now, and she has literally got probably a 20th of a second of screen time. You know what I mean? I'm exaggerating. Maybe a second. Maybe
a couple seconds.
A second.
Yeah.
And to go click, 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 and have that to this kid. I have a. I don't know. I cannot. It's so obscure that I'm not on board. I'm not on board.
It's interesting. The detective on the case that has the case now, because there's always a case custodian, even for cold cases, right? And the detective on the case said, there's like a 1 in a million chance that it's her, but stranger things have happened with cases before, and so it is possible.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that way. It's very unlikely that it's her, but it may be. And, but watching it, especially in 4K. And audience, which is very similar to 35 millimeter resolution, so it's very similar to what people would have seen in the theaters. She does, for a brief moment, her face almost kind of in profile or almost a 3/4 view does turn towards the camera, and you can see her really clearly. And if you knew that girl at all, you would definitely have recognized her if you saw her now. You would be like, oh, that's Aunt Mary or whatever, right? Like you can see her clearly enough in the movie to be able to identify her. And likewise, if that was her, she would be able to identify herself. Oh, that's me. I remember that shirt that I was wearing or whatever, right?
That's
and
very,
nobody
very
has ever come forward and said that was me or that was someone we knew or whatever. So maybe it just hasn't gotten enough coverage.
I was going to say, because I never, I'm a Jaws nut, and I never heard of it before you mentioned it the last episode or two ago. So maybe it does need the exposure to find out. But I know there's no record of any extras. There's nothing that they've been able to track down at Fox for, but then she wouldn't have, she probably would have just signed a release to be on it. And there's probably a stack
They also said
tall.
that back then, especially, movies didn't really keep track of the extras like they do as much now. And they weren't really as concerned about people coming forward and saying, hey. And they said also it's possible that those weren't even extras, that they may have just gone down to the dock and filmed the ferry coming in with regular old tourists. And
they have the signs up on the side of the road that say, if you enter this point, after this point, you're going to be in a movie, or you might be. So you can't claim ownership to it.
Exactly.
So there's,
it's very possible that those people were not even really extras. They just went down and filmed them like documentary footage of people getting off. And if you look at her, she doesn't look like she's acting. She looks like she's looking for somebody in the crowd. So she probably didn't even realize she was on camera.
Maybe she recognized the murderer.
Exactly. If you look around the screen, maybe the killer's there. I don't know.
So I guess that's fascinating. It's interesting. It's an unsolved crime, and who knows? Like you said, weirder things have happened.
Yeah, but if you go to 54 minutes and 4 seconds, she's on the far left of the screen. Brunette hair, kind of halfway down her back. Blue bandana over her head. White T-shirt and blue jeans. Yeah, and there she is. So if you know her, if you recognize her,
the profile
you can solve the
picture
mystery.
on my Facebook page is of that scene.
There you go. So the Lady of the Dunes, and she is buried in a grave, and her marker says, unidentified female body or something like that.
It's fascinating they exhumed her as many times as they have.
Yeah, I can't believe that with all the DNA stuff that they have now, the testing and everything, that they haven't fully exploited that yet to see who she's related to. Because that's how they caught the Golden State Killer. Was through these 23andMe and all these other DNA
the bloody clothes. Yeah, the bloody clothes have still got to be available to them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and no DNA evidence was found as far as like her being assaulted or anything like that, but they could at least, so they aren't going to be able to identify a killer, but at least they can identify who she was, and then that might, if the killer knew her, that might lead you to whoever did that to her.
Yeah, right.
You find her relatives, and then you find out. Oh,
Well,
yeah,
I
she had
hope
a creepy
happens.
boyfriend that none of us approved of, and he disappeared right when she disappeared, and there you go. There's your suspect.
Yeah. I hope I hope something happens and that cuts a bit more, gets a bit more attention, because that would be an interesting thing if the Hill kid, Joe Hill, actually did solve that. It'd be interesting.
That would be really cool. Yeah.
Or at least point something out. Didn't solve it because we still don't know who she is.
Mm-hmm.
But so I guess the last thing I guess that we should I think it'd be interesting to talk about is the actual physical shark, Bruce the shark, and
Sure.
And there were a couple of them, and that was famously a nightmare to work with in the water because the salt water was rusting all the gears, and they kept having to replace the flesh on it because it was getting eaten away by the salt water. So it was iconically an iconic shark. Legendarily failed on many times, which is why I think they
the
resorted.
first time, or one of the first times they used it just sank, and they had to hire divers to go down and bring it back. Bring it up from the bottom of the ocean.
an expensive prop, and all of them were. There was one. I think the last one that existed was at Universal, but they did, and that was destroyed. But they found that last one that was from the original mold. The last shark that existed from the original Bruce mold was in a junkyard in I think it was Sun Valley, just north of Los Angeles, for
amazing
years. It was just up in a tree, and in this junkyard, and it was the weirdest thing because Troy and I'm really glad we did that a couple of years ago because the junkyard's gone. But when you went to this junkyard to go in, it was one of those places where you buy stuff by the pound or something, right. And it was, but this weird shark was in the tree, and they said absolutely no photography allowed. It's like you got a shark in a tree. It's a shark from Jaws, and you're going to let us take pictures of it. So of course I got a bunch of pictures of it. But when they closed down the junkyard, thankfully they got it at the Academy, and the Academy when they open the museum is going to have an original Jaws molded shark.
That is amazing.
So there's a couple of pictures of them restoring it online that have just been released really recently because the Academy's been pushing back the release of that movie. Their museum. Supposed to be open years ago. So they're pushing it forward again. It's because of COVID, but they will have cool things like the ruby slippers,
I'm
like
really
the shark
excited
from Jaws.
about that museum.
Yeah, it's going to be it's fantastic, and it's crazy that we haven't had one. There are a couple of odd little museums. Yeah, so I hope that they get a lot of those. When they had that costume display, they had the Marilyn Monroe 7-Year Itch dress, and they had some really cool, iconic costumes. I hope they get those back to show in the Academy Museum.
I looked up, I inquired about how much you would have to donate to get your name on the wall in the museum. $250,000. So I didn't do that. I didn't do it.
No.
But back to the mechanical sharks, there were two sharks because one side of the shark had to be open for all the hydraulic stuff and all the wires and stuff coming out. So they had a left shark and a right shark, depending on what side you were going to be filming from. So that's why there were two sharks.
The Universal Studios here and in Orlando, and I just saw in Japan, they all had the Jaws rides. And the ones in Orlando in Japan were the full-on thing, where they do the whole, it's a boat trip for like 6 or 8 minutes, and that is like really cool. The one here is just part of the tram backlot tour, and it's probably 2 minutes out of this tour. But I was told that the Ben Gardner boat was brought back to Los Angeles for this ride, and that the original sign that said, that has the girl, help shark, the welcome to Amity sign, was the original one at Universal. They've since been replaced, obviously, because they're exposed to the elements, probably, dozens and dozens of times. But supposedly, I haven't seen otherwise. That was the actual Ben Gardner boat that's in this ride.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it's cool. My friend, I sent you the pictures earlier that my friend Jack sent of the ride when they were changing out one of the sharks. because you can see all the mechanics of the shark in the Universal ride. It's a really great picture and a really cool behind the scenes look at that thing. But it's such a cool thing. And you know, in the Universal ride here, when they have the Psycho House and the actor playing Anthony Perkins comes out with the knife and comes after the tram, and everyone screams and the tram goes. When they were filming Murder, She Wrote, the backdrop for the Jaws ride is the little village from Murder, She Wrote. And Angela Lansbury used to pop out where the tour buses were going by as you know, the character that she was playing. And
That's
and blow
amazing.
kisses to everyone on the bus. I think that's such a cool thing. But yeah, to see the Jaws display and Angela Lansbury pop out would be something.
When we were filming Unsolved, inside the Biggie and Tupac murders, or the murders of Tupac, and God, I can't remember the name of my own show I co-produced on Biggie and Tupac murders called Unsolved. We shot that on Universal. They gave us 2 sound stages, and the trams used to go by us all the time, and I used to stand out there and wave like I was somebody. And people would they'd take their picture and like video me like waving at them and stuff, because you don't know, you're in the back lot, right? You never know.
Yeah, most definitely. Cool.
I love that little tram ride. I've done that a few times.
Yeah, that's the only. I mean, Universal Studios is a cool studio, but it's an amusement park, except for the backlot tour.
Right. Yep.
And that's and I heard that they took away that Phantom of the Opera stage now. I heard that they removed that.
I don't know.
You know, the original Phantom of the Opera movie with Lon Chaney, there was an opera box, and it was still on one of the sound stages, like against one of the walls and hidden by stuff,
cool.
but still there. But I heard that they tore down that sound stage. I don't know what they did with that opera box, but somebody has to have it. I say that. Yeah. This is L.A. They rip down shit all the time.
Yeah, but somebody must have been like, we can't throw that away. Yeah, who knows?
I hope so. But yeah, it was there until fairly recently from you know, Lon Chaney. I mean, that's crazy. Wow. A Universal production. Cool stuff.
Yeah. All right. Did we do it?
I think we're done. I think we are good here. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover.
Thanks to everybody for listening. This has been our Jaws podcast. I'm so glad that we did this. This is a really fun one. And please, we are on Patreon, and we're up to 271 supporters now on Patreon. So a big thank you to our Patreon supporters, and you can be one too for as little as $2 a month. And
thank you guys.
Seriously. And you get early access to our shows if you do the $5 a month situation deal, and all our Patreon subscribers get our extra mini shows that we do between the big ones, which are usually like, you know, half hour or so extra shows just on random topics. So, and also they just help us keep the show going. So in the last episode, on Patreon, we talked about you doing the Elvira estate sale, and we talked about you meeting Ally McGraw and Troy showing her the Swinger Polaroid camera that she had gotten famous for advertising. Yes,
I sent you the jingle, didn't I? Yeah, that was a great commercial.
Her like on the beach with the camera. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that is a cool. But yeah, so thank you guys, and thank you Patreons and supporters. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody else who's listening for free. We appreciate all listeners, and we hope that it's as fun as we have recording this. I think you can tell from listening that we have fun doing this too. So,
and by the time you listen to this, it's going to be almost summer. I mean, almost the end of summer. Labor Day. Jesus Christ! Labor Day.
I know.
You know, well, that's something. We need summer dollars.
We do.
How many, as you know, means friendship.
All right, guys. We will see you on the next one.
Take care. Thank you.